Moses freed 2 million people from slavery. He parted the Red Sea. He climbed Sinai and spoke with God face to face. He was the most powerful leader Israel ever had in its entire history. And when he died, his sons inherited nothing, not the leadership, not the priesthood, not a tribe, not a territory, not even a significant mention in the entire Bible after Exodus chapter 18. They disappeared, as if someone had erased them. And when I started investigating why, I found something I didn't expect. I found clues hidden in the names of his sons. I found a family crisis that almost nobody teaches. I found a biblical silence so loud it's impossible for it to be accidental. And I found a verse that for centuries the Bible's own copyists tried to alter because what it said was too shameful to leave intact. Someone changed a letter in the Hebrew text, a single letter, to hide the truth about what happened to Moses' family. And today, we're going to follow every clue to the end. The first clue is in the names. Because in ancient Hebrew culture, a name wasn't a label, it was a prophecy, it was a cry of the soul. And the names Moses chose for his 2 sons revealed that something was very wrong inside his home before everything even started. His first son was named Gershom. Exodus chapter 2 verse 22 says Moses named him that because he said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." In Hebrew, Gershom comes from Gershom, which literally means stranger there. Think about that. Moses' first son didn't receive a name of victory, or hope, or blessing. He received a name of pain, a name that said, "I don't belong here. I'm a stranger. I'm out of place." Moses gave his son the wound he himself was carrying. When that happened, Moses was living in Midian. He had fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew, according to Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15. He was 40 years old. He had gone from being a prince in Pharaoh's palace to being a shepherd in the desert, from eating at golden tables to sleeping beside a flock, from wearing Egyptian linen to wearing shepherd's clothing. And when his first son was born, what came out of his heart wasn't joy, it was exile. "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." Imagine growing up with that name. Every time someone called you, it reminded you that your father felt out of place. Gershom didn't choose that name, but he carried it his whole life. His second son was named Eliezer. Exodus chapter 18 verse 4 says, "And the other was named Eliezer because he said, 'The God of my father helped me and delivered me from Pharaoh's sword.'" In Hebrew, Eliezer means, "My God is my help." And here, the first sign appears that something changed. Gershom is a name of pain. Eliezer is a name of gratitude. At some point between one son and the other, Moses went from defining himself by what he had lost to defining himself by what God had done. From "I'm a stranger" to "God helped me." That's interesting, but it's not the clue that matters. The clue that matters is what comes next. Because even though Moses named his sons with these profound declarations, the Bible practically stops talking about them. They appear in Exodus 18, and after that, silence. They're not in the Exodus. They're not in the wilderness. They're not in the conquest. They're not in Judges. They're not in the books of the Kings. It's as if they had evaporated. And a silence like that, in a culture that documented everything by lineage, is not accidental. Someone decided not to talk about them, or something happened that left nothing to say. And the second clue takes us to one of the darkest scenes in the entire Bible, a scene that happened before Moses even arrived in Egypt, before the plagues, before the Red Sea, before everything. A scene that involves blood, a flint knife, and a wife who was furious. Exodus chapter 4, verses 24 through 26. Moses has just received God's call at the burning bush. He has just accepted the mission to go to Egypt. He's on his way with Zipporah and his sons. And suddenly, the text says something that sounds like a nightmare. And it came to pass on the way, at the lodging place, that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Wait, read that again. God has just sent Moses on the most important mission in history. And on the way, God himself tries to kill him. Why? Most scholars understand that Moses had not circumcised one of his sons. Circumcision was the sign of the covenant with Abraham, established in Genesis chapter 17. It was non-negotiable, and the man who was about to deliver God's law to an entire nation had not fulfilled the most basic sign of the covenant in his own house. And what happens next is the first visible crack in Moses' family. Zipporah takes a sharp flint, cuts her son's foreskin, throws it at Moses' feet and says, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." In Hebrew, chatan damim. That is not a phrase of love, it's a phrase of reproach. It's a woman saying, "I married you and what I got was blood. Your religion demands blood from me. Your God demands blood from me." And that bitterness doesn't just go away. Why hadn't Moses circumcised his son? Many rabbinic commentators suggest that Zipporah, being a Midianite, daughter of Jethro, priest of Midian, didn't share the religious customs of Israel. Circumcision was not a Midianite practice, and Moses had given in to his wife's pressure. That tells us something nobody wants to say when they talk about Moses. Inside the house of Israel's deliverer, there was war. Not the war against Pharaoh, another war. The war between a man and his wife about how to raise their children. The war between two cultures, two worldviews, two ways of understanding God. And that war is the second clue to why Moses' sons ended up the way they did. But the third clue is perhaps the strongest, and it's hidden in a phrase that almost nobody stops to read. Exodus chapter 18 verse 2 says, "Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back." After he had sent her back, Moses sent his wife and sons back to Midian. At some point between the flint crisis and the liberation of Israel, Moses sent his family away. And during the entire Exodus, during the 10 plagues, during Passover night, during the parting of the Red Sea, during the giving of the law at Sinai, Moses' family was not with him. Do you understand what that means? The most important moment in Israel's history, the birth of a nation. And Moses' sons were not present. They didn't see the plagues. They didn't see the water turn to blood. They didn't see the frogs invade the palaces. They didn't see the darkness cover Egypt for 3 days. They didn't hear the death cry on Passover night. They didn't cross the sea with the water standing like walls on either side. They didn't eat manna for the first time. They didn't hear the thunder of Sinai or see the mountain wrapped in fire. They didn't see their own father's face shining when he came down from the mountain, so intensely that he had to cover himself with a veil, according to Exodus chapter 34, verses 29 through 35. They didn't witness the construction of the tabernacle. They weren't there when the cloud of glory descended and filled the sanctuary. They were in Midian with their grandfather Jethro, herding sheep, while their father was changing the course of human history. Imagine being Gershom. You're 10, maybe 12 years old. Your father left one day and didn't come back. He left you with your grandfather in the desert, and months later, you start hearing rumors that extraordinary things are happening in Egypt, that the river turned to blood, that frogs fell from the sky, that there was a darkness you could touch with your hands, that an entire people crossed a sea on dry ground, and that your father was the man who did all of it, your father whom you haven't seen in months, your father who gave you a name that means stranger. That father is now the most famous man in the world, and you're still here, in Midian, with the sheep. Every Israelite child who was the same age as Gershom and Eliezer could say, "I was there, I saw the sea part, I ate the manna." The Moses sons couldn't say any of that. The leader's sons missed everything the leader did. And that's not just a sad anecdote, it's a clue, because it tells us where they grew up. not in Israel's camp in Midian, with a grandfather who was a priest of a polytheistic culture. Hold on to that detail, because later you'll understand why it's devastating. When they finally reunited, the reunion reveals the fourth clue. And this clue is hidden not in what the text says, but in what the text does not say. Exodus 18 describes how Jethro brought Zipporah and the sons to the camp. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down, kissed him, and they sat down to talk. But notice what the text does not say. It doesn't say Moses embraced his sons. It doesn't say he kissed Zipporah. It doesn't say he was emotional about seeing his family. It doesn't say the children ran into their father's arms. The warmth is directed at Jethro. The sons and wife seem secondary in the scene. Compare this with other family reunions in the Bible. When Jacob reunites with Esau after 20 years, Genesis 33, verse 4 says, Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. When Jacob sees Joseph in Egypt after believing him dead, Genesis 46, verse 29 says, Joseph threw himself on his father and wept on his neck for a long time. The Bible knows how to describe emotional reunions. It has the vocabulary, it has the verbs, but with Moses and his sons, it doesn't use them. And that's a clue that screams. And after that reunion, Jethro watches Moses judge the people from morning until night and tells him, delegate, appoint judges, don't do it all yourself. And in the middle of that conversation about Moses' health, nobody mentions his family. Nobody says, Moses, you just got your wife and sons back after months of separation. Spend time with them. The advice is about efficiency, not fatherhood. The priorities are clear, and the sons see it. And in the middle of that entire scene, Gershom and Eliezer don't say a single word. No dialogue, no reactions, no emotions, physically present, narratively invisible. That invisibility is another clue, and that clue points to something the Bible will confirm later with surgical precision. Now I want you to see what the Bible does with Moses' sons from this point forward, because what follows isn't just silence. It's designed silence. And if what you just heard made you think of someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them now, because what's coming is much stronger. In ancient Israel, inheritance was automatic. If you were the son of a priest, you were a priest. If you were the son of a king, you were a prince. If you were the son of a patriarch, you were the head of a tribe. Nobody could take it from you. It was your birthright. Your identity, your future was sealed the day you were born. And in that culture, being Moses' son should have been the highest thing you could aspire to. Look at what happened with the other branch of the family. Aaron, Moses' brother, had 4 sons: Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. 2 died for offering strange fire before God, according to Leviticus chapter 10. But the other 2 inherited the priesthood. Eleazar became high priest after Aaron. His sons were priests. His grandsons were priests. His great-grandsons were priests. The priesthood passed through Aaron's line for 1,000 years, until the destruction of the Second Temple. That was normal, the rule, the pattern. And when you see that, the question becomes inevitable. If Aaron's sons inherited the priesthood, why did Moses' sons inherit nothing? And the answer begins to appear when you read 1 Chronicles chapter 23, verses 13 and 14. Pay attention, because these 2 verses placed side by side are like a knife. Verse 13, the sons of Amram, Aaron and Moses. Aaron was set apart to consecrate the most holy things, he and his sons forever, to burn incense before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless in his name forever. And verse 14, as for Moses, the man of God, his sons were named among the tribe of Levi. Do you see the difference? Not subtle, brutal. Aaron, most holy, forever. Incense, ministry, blessing, perpetually. Moses, his sons were counted as ordinary Levites, not priests, not leaders, not anything special, common Levites. The text doesn't even give them a specific role. It just says they were named among the tribe of Levi. named, like numbers, like one more in the crowd. Moses spoke with God face to face. His sons carried curtains of the tabernacle, but there's more. In Numbers chapter 3, verse 1, the Bible says, "These are the generations of Aaron and Moses." It says Aaron and Moses, but then it only lists Aaron's sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar. Moses' sons don't appear. It's as if the text erased them deliberately. The Talmud, in Sanhedrin 19b, explains this by saying that Aaron's sons could be considered Moses' generations because he was their teacher. His disciples counted more than his own biological sons. That's already a devastating sentence, but it's not the worst. Because when the time came to choose a successor for Moses, the rabbinic tradition recorded in Midrash Tanhuma, Parashat Pinchas 11, says Moses asked God to appoint one of his sons. He wanted the leadership to stay in his family, and God's response was direct. Your sons sat idle and did not occupy themselves with the study of the Torah. Joshua, who served you faithfully, is worthy to serve Israel. I want you to feel the weight of those words. God told Moses, your sons didn't put in the effort, they didn't study. They didn't prepare, Joshua did. And that's why Joshua will inherit what your sons don't deserve. Numbers chapter 27 verse 18 confirms the choice. Take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Not a man of your blood, a man with spirit. And look at the contrast, because this is devastating. Joshua appears in Exodus 17 fighting against Amalek. From day one, he's in action. He's serving. He's on the battlefield. Nobody asked him to go. He went because he wanted to be there. Later, in Exodus 24 verse 13, Joshua goes up with Moses to Mount Sinai as his servant, not as his son, as his servant, and he stays there, waiting on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, while Moses was receiving the tablets of the law at the summit. Think about that. 40 days, alone, on a mountain, not knowing if Moses was going to come back, not knowing what was happening up there, waiting, faithfully, without complaining, without leaving. And do you know what Moses' sons were doing during those 40 days? Probably nothing worth recording, because they weren't mentioned. Joshua waited 40 days on the mountain. Moses' sons don't appear anywhere in the account. And that's another clue, a big one. And then there's that extraordinary detail from Exodus 33, verse 11. It says Moses spoke with God face to face as a man speaks with his friend. And after Moses left the tent of meeting, the text says Joshua, his servant, a young man, the son of Nun, did not depart from the tabernacle. Joshua stayed. When Moses left, Joshua stayed. Not because he was ordered to, not because it was his obligation, but because he wanted to be there. He wanted to be in the place where God had spoken. He wanted to breathe the air that still vibrated with the divine presence. Have you ever stayed in a sacred place after everyone else left? Have you ever felt that a space still carries something of the presence that was there? Joshua felt that every time, and every time he stayed. Meanwhile, Moses' sons, who were Levites, who had privileged access to the same tabernacle, who could have been there any day, don't have a single verse that says they stayed. There's not a single record that they sought God on their own. The difference between Joshua and Moses' sons is the difference between someone who seeks God because they want to, and someone who grows up near God but never makes him their own. Up to this point, the investigation already has enough clues to explain why Moses' sons were erased. Divided family, absent father, upbringing between two cultures, lack of spiritual interest, rejected as successors, reduced to common Levites. That alone would be a complete story. But it isn't, because what I found next makes everything before it seem minor. There is a verse in the book of Judges that for centuries the Bible's copyists tried to hide. A verse that the Masoretic scribes literally altered because what it said was too shameful to leave intact. And what that verse says is the real reason Moses' sons were erased from history. If this is blowing your mind as much as it did mine, hit the like button on this video so more people can find these truths that almost nobody teaches. Judges chapter 18, verse 30. Listen carefully. And the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. Stop. Read that again. Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, became a priest of an idol, Moses' grandson, the grandson of the man who came down from Sinai with the 10 commandments, the first of which says, "You shall have no other gods before me." The grandson of the man who destroyed the golden calf with his own hands, who ground it to powder, mixed it with water, and made the Israelites drink it, according to Exodus chapter 32, verse 20. The grandson of the man who ordered the execution of 3,000 idolaters that same day. That grandson ended up serving as a priest of a carved image in the tribe of Dan. And it wasn't a one-day mistake. It wasn't a momentary temptation. The text says he and his sons served that idol until the day of the captivity of the land. Entire generations. The line of Moses serving idols for centuries, and now you understand why someone wanted to erase that from the text. But you still don't know how he got there. And the story of how he got there is almost worse than the outcome. So how did he get there? Judges chapter 17 tells the complete story. And it's one of the saddest narratives in all of Scripture when you understand who the protagonist is. A man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim had a private shrine with idols, an ephod, and teraphim. He had stolen 1,100 pieces of silver from his own mother, according to Judges 17, verse 2. When he returned them, his mother used 200 of those pieces to make a carved image and a cast idol and placed them in Micah's house. Micah had a household temple, a pagan temple in the middle of Israel, and he needed a priest. And one day, a young Levite who was wandering around looking for somewhere to settle passed by his house. A Levite with no home, no job, no direction, wandering through Israel, looking for a place where someone would want him. Micah offered him 10 pieces of silver a year, a set of clothes and food, and the Levite accepted. Judges 17 verses 10 and 11. That Levite was Jonathan, Moses' grandson, a descendant of the most important man in Israel's history, working as a priest for hire for an idolater in exchange for clothing and food. 10 silver coins. That was the price. Moses' grandson sold himself for 10 silver coins. And if that sounds familiar, it's because another descendant of Israel would be sold for 30 coins centuries later. But that's another story. And Judges 17, verse 11 says something that should break your heart if you understand the context. It says, Micah treated the Levite like one of his sons. Notice that. Moses' grandson, who probably grew up without the constant presence of his father or grandfather, ended up in the house of a stranger who treated him like a son. An idolater gave him what his own family couldn't: presence, belonging, identity, a place where he felt wanted. And in return, Jonathan gave him the only thing he had, his religious service, but he gave it to the wrong God. He gave it to a carved image made with stolen silver in the house of a man who wasn't even from his tribe. And then the story gets worse, because in Judges chapter 18, 600 men from the tribe of Dan, armed for war, passed through the region looking for territory. They entered Micah's house. They recognized the young Levite, and they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Judges 18, verses 19 and 20, "Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel?" And verse 20 says, "The priest's heart was glad. They offered him a promotion, and he took it without hesitation. No loyalty to Micah, no scruples, not a second of wavering. He left with the Danites. He took the idols, and he established an idolatrous worship center in the city of Dan that lasted for entire generations. Micah came running after the Danites, shouting, "You've taken my gods and my priest." Judges 18, verse 24. And the Danites told him, "Shut up, or we'll kill you." And Micah had to go back home without his idols and without his priest. Moses' grandson went with the highest bidder, like a spiritual mercenary, without roots, without loyalty, without conviction, just looking for whoever would offer him more. And here comes the part of the investigation that left me speechless. Because what I'm about to tell you is something most people will never hear in any church or any synagogue. The Masoretic scribes, the guardians of the Hebrew text for centuries, the men who copied every letter of the Bible with obsessive care, who counted every word and every letter of every book to make sure there wasn't a single error, did something extraordinary with this verse, something that goes against everything they stood for. To understand what they did, you need to know how ancient Hebrew works. In the original Hebrew text, the name that appears in Judges 18, verse 30, is Moses. In Hebrew, Moshe, written with 3 letters, Mem, Shin, He. The Masoretes didn't erase those letters. They didn't change them directly. They did something more subtle and more cowardly. They inserted a letter Nun, suspended above the text, floating between the original letters, changing Moshe to Manasseh. That is, they changed Moses to Manasseh, but not with a frank correction, with a letter that floats above the line of text, as if it were ashamed to be there, as if the scribes themselves knew that what they were doing was wrong, but couldn't bear the alternative. Why? Because they found it too humiliating that a direct descendant of Moses had fallen into idolatry. They preferred to alter the sacred text rather than leave that truth exposed. The men whose sacred work was to preserve every letter of God's word decided there was a truth that God's word shouldn't contain. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This textual alteration is one of the most documented and recognized cases of scribal intervention in the entire Hebrew Bible. Rabbi David Kimchi, one of the most important medieval commentators in Judaism, openly acknowledges it. Dr. Benjamin Kennicott, one of the greatest biblical scholars of the 18th century, dedicated entire pages of his work to documenting this case. The Latin Vulgate, Jerome's translation, reads Moses. The Greek Septuagint reads Manasseh, but the majority of the oldest Hebrew manuscripts and virtually all modern scholars agree that the original name was Moses. The scribes tried to protect Moses' memory by changing his name in the text. They tried to erase the connection between Israel's greatest lawgiver and his idolatrous grandson. And the ironic thing is that by trying to hide it, they made it more visible. Because that suspended nun, that letter floating above the text like an accusing finger, is one of the most famous markers in the entire Masoretic tradition. Every scholar who studies the Hebrew text knows it. Every rabbi knows what it means. The attempt to hide the truth became a beacon pointing directly at it. And now, you understand the title of this video. Moses' sons weren't just forgotten. They didn't just fade into anonymity. They were actively erased. The scribes literally changed a letter so nobody would connect the idolatrous grandson with the lawgiver grandfather. That's what erased from history means. It's not a metaphor. It's a documented textual fact. But the investigation doesn't end there. Because there's a connection that very few people make and that multiplies the impact of all of this 100-fold. Centuries after Jonathan established his idolatrous center in Dan, the kingdom of Israel split in two. And when Jeroboam founded the northern kingdom, do you know what he did? 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 28 and 29 says he made 2 golden calves and declared, "Here are your gods, O Israel." And he placed one in Bethel and the other in Dan. Dan, the same city, The same place where Moses' grandson had planted the seeds of idolatry generations before. Jeroboam didn't invent idolatry in Dan. He found it there. The ground was already prepared, the roots were already planted, and the one who planted those roots was a direct descendant of Moses. What started as a Levite looking for work ended up becoming one of the two centers of pagan worship that would divide Israel forever. A personal decision, an individual fall, national consequences that lasted centuries. The idolatrous sin of the northern kingdom, the very sin that eventually caused the exile and destruction of the 10 tribes, has one of its roots in Moses' family. One man, a grandson who grew up without a father, a Levite who sold himself for 10 silver coins and a plate of food. And the ripples of that fall extended for generations until they destroyed half of Israel. Are you starting to see why the scribes wanted to erase that connection? Are you starting to understand why they changed that letter? But the investigation still isn't over. Because now comes the most important question of all. And the answer is hidden in all the clues we've been gathering throughout this video. Each clue on its own seems like a loose piece. But when you put them all together on a table and step back, the picture that emerges takes your breath away. Now there's a question you've probably been asking for a while. How is it possible? How can the grandson of the man who spoke with God face to face end up serving a carved image made with stolen silver? What failed so radically that in just 2 generations, Moses' line went from the highest peak of spiritual history to the darkest pit of idolatry? The answer isn't in a single cause, it's in the accumulation of all the clues. And when you see them together, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Clue 1. Moses' sons grew up in Midian, not in Israel. While every other child of their generation was living the Exodus, they were with Jethro. And Midian was not a spiritually neutral place. The Midianites participated in the idolatrous seduction of Israel at Baal Peor, along with the Moabites, according to Numbers chapters 25 and 31. They had priests, they had rituals, they had a complete polytheistic cosmology. Jethro was part of that system. And while Exodus 18 shows a Jethro who acknowledges the Lord, in the polytheistic culture of the ancient Near East, you could respect a foreign god without abandoning your own. You could add gods. You could say, your God is great, without ceasing to serve your own. Moses' sons grew up in that environment. An absent father who served the one true God, a present grandfather who was a priest of a pagan culture. Think about the emotional math of this. Moses was absent during the entire Exodus, the entire giving of the law, the entire construction of the tabernacle. That's at least a year, probably more. Jethro was present every day, every morning, every meal, every night. Who do you think had more influence on the spiritual formation of Gershom and Eliezer? The father who was changing the world, or the grandfather who was there when they were afraid at night? The seeds that were planted in Midian bore fruit 2 generations later, when Jonathan ended up serving idols in Dan. The direct line between Jethro's polytheism and Jonathan's idolatry is not a coincidence. It's cause and effect. Clue 2. The religious tension between Moses and Zipporah. The Flint incident proves there was an active conflict about religious practices in the home. That tension doesn't disappear, it gets passed down. Children grow up in divided homes and absorb the ambiguity. Clue 3. The separation. Moses sent his family away. The sons didn't experience the foundational events of Israel. They don't have a direct experience of God's power. They only have second-hand stories. Clue 4. The cold reunion. When they meet again in Exodus 18, the sons are invisible. No emotional connection recorded. No spiritual investiture. No transmission of anything. Clue 5. Moses gave them nothing special. Numbers chapter 12 verse 3 calls him the meekest man on the face of the earth. When God offered to destroy Israel and make a great nation from Moses alone, in Exodus 32, verses 9 and 10, Moses refused the offer. He interceded for the people. He preferred to be blotted out of God's book rather than see Israel destroyed. According to verse 32 of the same chapter, his selflessness was genuine. He didn't use his position to benefit his family. He didn't give them titles. He didn't give them positions. He didn't give them special inheritances. Commentators point to this as evidence of his integrity, but there's another way to see it. Perhaps by not giving them anything special, he left them without the spiritual structure they needed. Perhaps by being so fair to the nation, he was insufficient for his sons. Perhaps the meekness that made him great before God made him absent before his family. And there's another clue that adds yet another layer. Numbers chapter 12 verse 1 says, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married. This verse has generated centuries of debate. Some scholars believe the Cushite woman is Zipporah herself, since Cush and Midian were geographically close regions. Others believe Moses married a second wife after Zipporah died or returned permanently to Midian. The text doesn't clarify, but what it does say is that Moses' married life was a point of conflict even within his own family. If there was a second wife, Zipporah's sons were pushed even further to the margins. If Zipporah died, they were left motherless with a father too busy to raise them. Either way, more fragmentation. Clue 6. The greatest irony of this entire story. Moses wrote Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. The Shema, the most sacred declaration of the Jewish faith. The most important instruction on spiritual parenting in all of Scripture, and the man who wrote it apparently failed to fulfill it in his own home. It's hard to talk to your children when you sit in your house when you're not in your house. It's hard to repeat the law to them when you lie down and when you rise, when you're judging the people from morning until night. Put all the clues together: absent father, mother from another culture, upbringing in Midian, separation during the most important events, reunion without emotional connection, no privileges given, no spiritual transmission documented, and 2 generations later, the grandson ends up serving idols. It's not an accident. It's a chain of cause and effect that started with a broken family and ended with a fallen line. And this pattern is not unique to Moses. It's a pattern that repeats with alarming precision throughout Scripture, as if God was saying the same thing over and over, and humanity kept refusing to listen. The sons of Eli, the priest who raised Samuel in the tabernacle at Shiloh, were wicked. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 12 through 17 says they did not know the Lord, and forcefully took the meat of the sacrifices before God's portion was offered. Verse 17 summarizes it. The sin of the young men was very great before the Lord. Eli warned them, but his warnings were lukewarm, and God said to Eli directly in chapter 2, verse 29, "Why do you honor your sons more than me?" And the punishment was the death of both sons on the same day in the battle against the Philistines. Samuel's sons were also corrupt. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1 through 3 says that when Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges, but they did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. And it was precisely the corruption of Samuel's sons that led the people to demand a king. The monarchy in Israel was born, literally, from the failure of a spiritual leader's sons. There is something about extreme spiritual leadership that seems to create a vacuum in the next generation. Parents who change nations sometimes lose their own children, not because they don't love them, but because the mission devours all the oxygen in the house. The tabernacle takes the attention that should go to the family table. The congregation's needs displace the children's needs. And the children who watch their father give everything to others learn a lesson nobody meant to teach them, that God is someone who steals your father from you. I heard the story of a pastor who spent 30 years building one of the largest churches in his country. Thousands of people, national influence, published books, international conferences. When he retired, he expected his son to take over the leadership. But his son wanted nothing to do with the church. He had grown up eating dinner alone because his father was in meetings. He had grown up hearing thousands of people say his father was incredible, while he couldn't remember the last time his father had come to watch him play soccer. He had grown up watching his father cry at the pulpit for people he didn't know, but never cry with him when he was scared at night. That son didn't hate God. He hated the version of God that had been imposed on him. He hated the God that always needed more of his father than he did. And when he had the chance to choose, he chose to walk away. That story repeats thousands of times around the world, and the Bible documented it first, 3,000 years earlier, with Moses' family. Now there's something I need to clarify because it's important to be honest with the text. The Bible doesn't say Moses was a bad father. It doesn't accuse him directly. It simply remains silent. And that silence is more eloquent than any accusation. Because biblical silence is not neutral. If Moses' sons had been men of outstanding faith, the Bible would have mentioned them. The Hebrew text celebrates faithful sons. It names them, it honors them, it gives them space. If Gershom and Eliezer had done anything worth recording, we would have chapters about them. The silence is the verdict. They did nothing bad enough to warrant explicit reproof. But they also did nothing good enough to warrant mention. They were mediocre. And in the lineage of Moses, mediocrity is perhaps the greatest failure possible. But now comes something that changes everything, because this investigation has one last piece, and that piece transforms the entire story from tragedy into something you didn't expect. Not everything we know about Moses' descendants is dark. 1 Chronicles chapter 23, verses 15 and 16 says that Gershom's son was Shebuel, and that he was a chief. And 1 Chronicles 26, verse 24 says that Shebuel, son of Gershom, son of Moses, was the officer in charge of the temple treasuries under David. That means at least one branch of Moses' descendants found their way back, not as priests, not as national leaders, but as faithful stewards of the sanctuary's treasure. And on Eliezer's side, 1 Chronicles 23 verse 17 says his son Rehabiah had many descendants. The line didn't disappear, it simply submerged into the anonymous mass of ordinary Levites. Numbers without prominence, but there's a detail hidden in the name Shebuel that is the final revelation of this entire investigation. And it's a detail that the very scribes who changed the nun could not erase. A detail that has been hidden for 3,000 years in the Hebrew text, waiting for someone to connect it with everything we've discovered today. Shebuel, in Hebrew, can be read as Shavel, and Shavel literally means return to God. The name of the descendant from Moses' fallen line contains within itself the prophecy of its restoration. Think about what that means. The same line that produced Jonathan, the homeless Levite, the priest for hire, the spiritual mercenary who sold himself for 10 coins and a plate of food, also produced Shebuel. The one who returned to God. From the same root that bore the most rotten fruit in Israel's history came a fruit of restoration. The line fell. Jonathan served idols in Dan. His sons served idols. His grandsons served idols. But at some point in that chain of darkness, someone decided to come back. Someone with Moses' blood looked at the idols his family had served for generations and said, "This is not what my great-grandfather stood for." And he came back, not as a priest, not as a leader, not as anyone important, but as a faithful steward of the treasures of God's house, and his name was itself a silent testimony, Shuvel, returned to God. That's what closes this investigation, and that's what turns it from tragedy into hope. The scribes tried to erase the shame by changing a letter. God didn't need to erase anything. God didn't need to hide anything. God simply waited for generations. And from the same line that had fallen into idolatry, he raised someone whose name meant return to God. Because that's what God does. He doesn't erase history. He redeems it. He doesn't hide the fall. He transforms it. The man who spoke with God face to face had sons who never sought him, and a servant who was not of his blood sought him every day of his life. Moses left an eternal legacy, but that legacy didn't pass through his sons. It passed through an orphan from the tribe of Ephraim who stayed in the tent of meeting when everyone else left. Your last name doesn't save you. Your hunger does. If you want to discover another biblical mystery that will leave you speechless, there's a video on screen right now that connects directly with what we just uncovered. What you'll find there is going to challenge everything you thought you knew. Just click.